Welcome to the Founder Experience, where we're charting the unpredictable waters of startup ventures. I'm Nathan Williams.
And I'm Alex Gutjahr.
Okay, picture it. It's about 10 years ago. It's about 2014, 11 years ago. I was fundraising for my previous startup, which was a chemical regulations database, which is a very, sort of a bit of a boring topic, but I had actually met someone who was interested to become an investor in this. He had started his own chemical database company and was actually at one point the president of the International Union for Pure and Applied Chemistry. Fairly well-known guy. His name was Rene. And I met him and I said, "Do you want to invest in my company?" And he said, "Your company looks really interesting, but I want to see if there's a business here. So I want to introduce you to my friend who owns a chemicals business to see if he would use it." And I said, "Great, what's your friend's name?" And he said, "I don't know." I said, "Okay." And he said, "Meet me in front of the Winter Garden Theater at 7:00. So I said, "Okay." And I met,
That sounds like a bad movie.
I mean, public place, it's okay. And this guy I've met a few times. He seemed reasonable. So I met him in front of the Winter Garden Theater. And I said, "Oh, are we going to the theater with your friend?" And he said, No. It's around the corner." He walked around the corner to an old abandoned factory, the Maggie Spice Factory, that was here in downtown Berlin. And he said, "My friend is a member of a club. It's a bit of a funny club. It's called Schlaraffia. And it's only men in this club. We only speak German. We meet only during the springtime and I think it's the spring and the fall. And it's existed since the 1800s, and no one uses their real name. Everyone's got a club name." I walked down the stairs to the door of a bar that was in the basement of this abandoned factory and opened the door, and everyone was dressed like Harry Potter.
No way.
Yes. Everyone had robes on. They had an owl statue as a mascot, and everyone greeted each other with owl noises. They said, "Lulu, Lulu," when they went.
Nathan, at this point, I have to ask, like, at what point do you then just think, like, whether you should continue or should just leave as fast as you can? And I would think about, did I share my location with anyone? Does anyone know that I'm here at this point? Because that doesn't sound like a good idea.
Well, I was actually texting my wife the entire time and saying, "This is what's going on. They're greeting each other with owl noises. I'm sitting next to a man named Champignon." Because they all used fake names. They gave me a seashell to wear around my neck because it was my first time being there.
Okay.
And my wife said, "How drunk are you?" And I said, "Extremely drunk, but it's really happening."
Well, yeah.
I mean, it was fun. It was a lot of fun. I see it felt a little bit like, one of those, a little bit like the Masons, what it was is like these secret societies existed back, so many years ago. And it was the way, and this one was sort of like arts themed. So what happened was each person got a chance to go up to the front of the room, read a poem where, like, the dragon was the mother-in-law and the castle was their house, and they would read a poem about how their week had been, and then everyone would knock on the table and go "Lulu, Lulu" with their owl noises, and then they'd walk under people who had swords outstretched in under a hallway of swords to get a chocolate off of a pillow held by the president of the event. It was very ceremonial. But there were some high-level people there. I heard that there were some Bundestag members there that night, and
Okay.
so it was like some pretty, I was easily the youngest person there. And
But are you allowed to talk about it even?
No, probably not.
Okay, good.
But I mean, it's not like it's so secret because you can actually Google it, and they have
Okay.
They have pictures. If you Google Schlaraffia, you'll find two things: a mattress company and pictures of this event.
But
yeah, the reason I'm telling you this story is because you ask if I'm allowed to talk about it. I talk about it to everybody.
Mhm.
I tell everyone this event when they ask me how I started meeting investors. Why? Because I'm quite shy at networking events. I actually don't know how to talk to people. And often you go to a networking event, you have to meet strangers. And your first thing is, what do you do for work? What's your
Yeah.
name? Where are you from? I like to have 3 or 4 interesting stories in my back pocket that I can lead a conversation with that will get people talking about something else. This is how I manage a networking event is I will lead with this story. This is my favorite story because it's so unexpected. I ended up going into something that seems like it was the Loyal Order of Water Buffaloes in the Flintstones, if you ever used to watch that TV show.
Yeah, I did.
And but it really exists, and you can really Google it, and
Yeah.
people are surprised, and then I Google it and show them pictures of these people dressed like in their robes with their hats, and um and so that's how I manage to overcome that uncertainty as someone who doesn't always know how to start a conversation.
Mhm.
As I try to, I'll lead with a question like, "What's your best story?" And or I'll lead, "Do you want to hear mine? My best war story of being a founder and trying to find investors." What is it? What are some of your ways of bridging the gap and meeting new people when you're all alone at a networking event?
That's so. Yeah, usually I'm a little bit worried, and I think we briefly touched upon this as well during the kind of the storytelling episode. But it's I don't like going to a network event by myself. Usually I have someone. So my that's and I would consider myself also an introvert. But before we go there, I just want to know for the story, the like Schlafia, is that it's not an investor society. It's like people
No,
just think, and the investor just happened to be one of them and
just
was there. That
happened to
was
be one of them.
good because I wasn't sure if that's just their spiel where you just go and then meet them and it's like, okay, pitch your startup and then you
No,
get
no, this was not a
promoted.
startup event at all, at all, not at
Yeah.
all.
But this is so what I because this is similar to what we discussed, limited downward risk and potential upside, right? It's similar for me with meeting people, especially during these kind of networking events. And I always like to think, what's the downside, right? You have to spend a little bit of time, and usually I like to bring a friend, um, where I can say, okay, look, we can go there and spend time, and he would also be into meeting new people. Then I could say, look, either we have a good time there and have a drink and then leave because it's not fun, or we meet new people, have good stories, and then just can start chatting, right? And as we previously what we discussed, I like to just open up with something that's where I'm not too offensive, and I usually don't like to discuss jobs as the first thing, but something that just warms them up, right? And I like these kind of stories very much.
Well, what's the craziest event you've been to?
What's the craziest event I've been to? That's a good question.
I mean, you go to marijuana events, right? Like, but
That's true.
those
I
sound like
yeah.
they're probably pretty boring, actually.
It's see that happened so recently that I almost forgot about it. It was like it was just last week. These are crazy. They are most so for especially for cannabis, you have to distinguish between there's the recreational side of things and there's the medical side of things. And our business is in the medical cannabis niche.
Mm.
But the event we went to last week was mostly focused for the recreational side of things, and that's wild because people are usually smoking during the event, and then the you see a lot of things. So it's not so this is B2C mostly, right? So I've been to B2B events where it's very professional, high level. It's clear that you talk about business. This was not. So it was. I mean, it was a little bit smaller. I also attended the Mary Jane earlier this year, but these are the craziest events that I've been to. Not as crazy as your story, I have to admit, but in terms of when you exhibit somewhere, these are uh, there's nothing that compares. So it's that's crazy for sure.
I think that having these crazy stories is very helpful in bridging the gap as well because it it puts you outside of your comfort zone.
Yeah,
And you're never going to bridge new ground if you stay within your comfort zone, right? As a founder, as in anything, and oftentimes what I find as a founder, I like to build things. I like to build a business, but the building is the easy part.
Mhm.
Building is something that's comfortable. I know how to build. I know how to, like I know how to do what I do things in my computer. What I don't know how to do is deal with brand new situations, right? And that's where you got to go in order to make new things happen. You got to go to where people are dressed like Harry Potter.
I can imagine. But this is also when it comes to, especially for the networking events, how do you approach leaving a conversation? Because that's, I find that quite hard, and I'm not sure like if that's mostly because I would consider myself introvert in these situations. But it's almost easier for me to get into a conversation to just meet someone, but then at some point I start thinking about like how do we end this without being rude, without like, because they're like, especially doing networking events, like if they're set up like this, you want to meet more people, right? You want to increase the surface of new things or new people coming in. So this is always something where I start thinking about, and I don't have a toolbox of outros or exit scenarios where I'm not being rude but still can move on to the next person or do something else. How do you handle that?
Okay, so when I was in university and I did my MBA, one of the courses that I did was with someone who was just an amazing networker. And she
Mhm.
gave me a great tip for this. But I warn you, this tip is effective but dangerous.
Okay.
She said, always keep your glass half full. Oh,
Ooh, I see.
if
So
you're
you
if you want to leave a conversation, you
yeah,
finish
I
your
see.
drink and then you have to go get another one. Now, this is really effective. It's great. It's smooth. People don't care that you're saying goodbye, but then I got a very good alcohol tolerance for that. I could drink 10 drinks in an evening at that point, and it was not healthy. So there are more healthy ways to do this as well. But definitely that one is the one that you can lean on.
Mhm.
I don't do that not at all anymore. What I because it was really wreaking havoc on my health. So what I tend to do now is I try to talk for, to get a sense of where they're at. And then what I will do when I feel I want to leave the conversation is try to give nonverbal signals while saying goodbye. So I will say, well, like, well, it
Yeah.
was really nice to meet you. I'm going to go and work the room now, or I'm going to go and try to meet some other people before the time is up. And like, which is a normal thing. The thing about networking events is that everybody there is there to make business and to meet new people, right? And
Mhm.
so it can be a little bit awkward if you sort of pretend that you're there to make friends. You're not there to make friends. You're there to
Yeah.
make business, right? And everyone should know that. And so if you just address it head on, great to meet you. I'm going to go see if I can meet a few more people before the evening is over. That is a very normal thing. And so then, and people will, I mean, if someone said that to you, you'd understand that.
Yeah, for sure. But it still makes it hard for me to do this on the spot and be like, okay, I gotta go. I'm sorry, and then just continue.
Never apologize.
Okay.
Never apologize because it's because this is about mindset, right? You're giving them an out. Maybe they don't know how to end the
True.
conversation, right? You're giving them an out, and you just have to have a phrase memorized. The hard part is knowing how to say it. You know what you want to say. You want to say I'm leaving, but you want to have a phrase memorized. Well, it's been a pleasure meeting you. I want to go and meet a couple other people. Enjoy the rest of the day, and I have your card now. That's another one. If you don't want to do the drink trick and you do want a physical out, business cards. Handing someone a business card at the end of a conversation signals that it's over, right? So you go, okay, it was nice to meet you. Here's my card. Oh, I don't do cards. Okay, that's fine. But anyway, it was really nice to meet you. I'll be in touch.
Yeah.
Because giving the card signals that it's over. If you give the card at the beginning, you wasted it. Just wait till the end of the
That's
conversation.
that that's actually good. I like that. I like the glass, and it doesn't have to be alcohol, I suppose, but it like a sand clock. You can just see, okay, like if people know that trick, right? They know, okay, time's up. I should probably finish. And so I had an awkward situation now that you brought that up during the exhibition like last week. I had someone approach me from another company, and we spoke, and at one point he did this. I'm not sure if you can see this. Raised the hand in that direction, but he wanted to show something, and I was like, "Yeah, let's shake hands. It was nice meeting you." And then he just and then he we shook hands, and then he still continued, and I was like, "This is so awkward." But it was really like he approached me like this, but wanted to demonstrate something. I totally didn't get it, and then I was like, "Yeah, fine." But that's you really have to be able to read the signals and not misunderstand them. But I like the water. I like the business cards. Though then you would have to have like that's a good point for physical business cards, though, right? And I think you mentioned before that you still always keep them, and I also always have them. But it's good to just present them at the end. And I think also if you are if you happen to be the host, you have an unfair advantage, right? So you can
Oh
host
yeah.
these events. So just thinking how new founders would just get about meeting people, right? So I think meetups, etc., like these supposed networking events. But I think one of the shortcuts, if you will, is just host events, right? Because then you can invite people. And we did this as well in the past, where you just figure out, okay, like who are the right people that I want to talk to, usually C-level kind of people, and then you invite them, right? And it doesn't have to be an awkward networking event. It doesn't have to be awkward at all, but it could also be a get together where you just also have some food or sit together. And when you're the host, I think it's much easier because then you are expected to just go around, meet people, chat, right, and then just connect them, even if you happen to know who they are. So I think that's also a great way to do this. And just the last point to finish on this is also events, conferences. We did this during the agency work as well, because I find when I'm attending a conference and I wanted to speak to someone who's interesting, it's mostly the speakers, right? Because you know who they are, how they think, but then everyone approaches the speaker and wants to speak to them after the session. So I figured, okay, we just go on conferences and have like we give like these talks ourselves, and then people would approach us. It's a higher return on your time because you just have to go there and come in for your talk. Afterwards, people would approach you. You could just exchange business cards, and then you could be out. You don't have to go to the conference like all day or days.
Absolutely. Like being a speaker is like a cheat code for an introvert, right? Like, because a lot of people will look at me and say, oh, this Nathan must be an extrovert because he's always speaking at events. It's my favorite thing to be on the stage, but it's for the opposite reason that people think,
Yeah.
like I'm outgoing, right? I'm an outgoing fellow. But being on stage is great because it's first of all, it's impersonal. It's
Mhm.
like conducting a symphony, right? Like I'm working with a crowd, but I'm not working with an individual. People approach you afterwards, so there's not this awkward "how do I get into a conversation" sort of thing. And it just changes the entire dynamic of how people approach you because you've been speaking, they're going to speak to you about something you know about because they're looking for a way to start a conversation with you. They're going
Yeah.
to talk about what you spoke about,
Yes.
right? So it fixes a lot of those awkwardnesses at the beginning. So definitely seek out any speaking events that you can as a networker or as a founder. The opposite is true if you are at an event when someone is speaking. Usually, the person that you want to meet is the speaker, right? Because the speaker is probably a fairly prominent person. Whereas if you're just working the crowd, you might meet 15 students that can't help your business or something.
Yep. Yeah.
If you want to meet the speaker, make sure you ask a question publicly during the Q&A session.
Oh, that's a good
You
one.
They're speaking on a subject, they've got a Q&A, be the first up there, raise your hand, go up, ask a relevant question relevant to what they were talking about, and then approach them afterwards. Hi, I was the guy who asked the question. And then you can start the conversation, right? Because it makes it so much easier.
Yeah. I like that. I never thought about the Q&A session. It's usually you see people not asking any questions at all, right? So there's less competition. It makes sense if you just raise your hand and start asking questions. You might be even the only one, depending on what kind of conference you go to. But is there anything else that you would recommend where especially new founders can go to meet people apart from events, conferences, etc.?
I mean, oh, yes. I mean, there's all sorts of them, right? But I mean, the easiest on ramps for a founder to get on this are startup events, of course.
Hmm.
But startup events are going to be populated by two types of people, investors and other startups. And so that's usually a starting point. But unless your business is a startup focused business, like a startup agency or something like that, your ability to expand your network into relevant areas is going to be limited. So the next level of it would be industry events for the industry that you're focused on. So if you're focused on machines, then a machining event. If you're focused on 3D printing, a 3D printing event. If you're focused on marijuana, a marijuana event, right? And then beyond that, you can start to think of where else will people that are relevant to what I do going to hang out. I I always like going to media events. I always find those to be interesting because no matter what you do, people are interested in talking about what you do, right? Because there's a certain amount of novelty. We don't have to talk about media. We have, like, I went to a newspaper event hosted by a newspaper,
Hmm.
and that was interesting talking to a bunch of journalists because they're always looking at different angles and stories to cover that I wouldn't normally think about, right? And so that it's an opportunity to bring together a different world.
But what was your motivation for going there? Was it on a topic that you're interested in, or was it just exposing yourself to these people and just start chatting and seeing what happens?
The honest truth is, I got invited because I met someone at a different event, at a startup event. So I met a
Hmm.
couple of reporters, and they said, "Oh, there's this event going on over at the newspaper later," and so I went with them. And sometimes you just have to connect with people and go outside of your circle in order to
Yeah.
expand your knowledge. And because this is where the innovation happens. It's when you start going beyond the clutch of people that you normally see. The people that are within your immediate circle are great if you're already successful. If you're not successful yet, then they're not going to help you expand beyond your own border boundaries and
Yeah.
borders. So that's when you have to start seeing, how can I expand my reach.
And I would argue that apps or platforms like Meetup or Luma make it much easier to discover these events in the first place, right? I sometimes scroll through Luma. I think it's very tech focused and very blockchain focused, or it seems to have started from that perspective. But usually, especially in Berlin, I just scroll through the events and see if there's anything, even that I could join online. Though I think networking is usually much more effective when done in person, right? So I try to scroll through them and see, okay, what other events happen there that might be totally unrelated to what I'm doing, but still sound fun to join. And one example I recently had is I usually like writing code a lot still.
Mm.
And I wouldn't even do it, or I still do it if I wouldn't get paid for it, just for fun because I like the activity so much. But recently people started vibe coding, right? Where they just not code at all. And there was an event in CIO in Berlin where there was an intro, and I feel like it sounds it's more related to what I'm doing, but I still thought it's fun to just see that. That was a remote event still, or it also was happening in person, but I attended remotely. But I think these are nice platforms to just search, is there anything that sounds fun? And then just go in there and then or showing up if you can, if it's open for everyone, and then seeing what comes out of that, and seeing if there are new perspectives or new ideas or new contacts. And you never know what's coming out of that.
You can only you can only go to new things. That's the like it. You going to new events. You can only have upside, right?
Yeah.
Like There's no downside to trying to go to a new place, and it's only your own internal nervousness and limitation, and this is the challenge of us as people to overcome that in order to grow our business, right?
That's it for this episode of The Founder Experience. If you enjoyed it, do us a favor, hit subscribe wherever you are listening, whether that's Spotify, YouTube, or your favorite podcast app. If you've got a second, leave a rating or a review. It really helps. And you can find more episodes and behind the scenes stuff on our website, founderexperience.fm. And if you've got feedback or business ideas that you want us to talk about, shoot us a message at hello@founderexperience.fm. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for hanging out. We'll catch you next time.